alert and rise over the sympathetic nervous system. So every time they ring a bell is an alarm in human nature. So when you're in a classroom and you ring a bell, you immediately activate kids' sympathetic nervous systems and you get them all fired up. And then they wonder why they don't want to sit still. It's because their cortisol level has just shot through the roof, along with their adrenaline and noradrenaline levels. So today, we are going to do some yoga, but we're also going to talk about the endocrine system, which is the system that regulates our hormones in our body, and it directly interacts with our autonomic nervous system. The mothership of the endocrine system sits in our brain, and it's called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus, in terms of the inside of our brain, is pretty much located right above our brainstem. And if we remember a little bit of the anatomy of the inside of our skull, the major hole in the bottom of our skull is our foramen magnum. And that is where our spinal cord enters into the cranium. We split everything up in order to get an understanding of it, but really our spinal cord and our brainstem aren't separate. We split them up logically, but it's all one continuous bundle of nervous fibers and tracts that conduct nervous signals throughout the body. So we come through here, say my fingers in my brainstem, and my hypothalamus pretty much sits right on top of it. There's a small space within the cranium called the sella turcica, which means the Turkish saddle. And in that space sits our pituitary gland, which is another part of our endocrine system. Our pineal gland sits behind, underneath the hypothalamus and behind it. So more like kind of in this area where my finger is right now is where your pituitary gland sits. Your pineal gland sits, whereas your pituitary gland sits right in here. So this is kind of a poor example in order to show you guys. But right in there, if I had a real skull, it'd be more obvious. And I'll pass the sucker around so you can see things. There are two basically holes, or smaller foramen. So foramen just means hole. Right at the base, or right in front of the saddle. That's where your optic nerves from your eyes pass. So your eyes are an extension of your brain. It's really your brain on the outside, to be dead honest. Those optic nerves pass right by the pituitary gland. When people start to lose their vision, we do vision tests in terms of which fields they're losing vision in. And one of the things that can cause vision problems is an enlargement of your pituitary gland, or a pituitary tumor, which is also associated with abnormal growth. So people that are giants, so over 7 feet tall, most likely have a pituitary problem, and that's why they end up being so big. So I'm going to go through your sequence of integral hatha yoga, and we're going to kind of splice it up with the endocrine system. So we start with the hypothalamus, which is in the middle of our brain. So everybody put your hand on your head. Okay. Now, the easiest way to think about where the pituitary gland is if you come just lateral to your eyes, and you imagine coming in on a dissecting line, and right behind your eyes is where your pituitary gland is. Now, our pineal gland is commonly associated with the idea of the third eye. So we often touch the middle of our forehead, but really our pineal gland sits more kind of in line with the tip of the ear into the middle of the brain. So we're not literally talking about up here, where your right and left hemispheres are. We're talking more really central, so kind of like behind the roof of my mouth, essentially. If you went back and up is where you'd get to the area of the brain that I'm talking about. So we're still in the mid, what we kind of call like the midbrain, as opposed to the cortex, which is our new brain. So we're talking about the old brain, the brain that develops, the ancient part of the brain that is developed pretty much in all species that walk on legs or swim in the ocean. When we get to the cortex, which is right here and right here, you know, humans have the biggest cortex, and then it's attributed to our abilities to have higher conscious thought and more complex skills, like building buildings and tubes and stuff like that. So in terms of hormonal control of the endocrine system, it pretty much affects every part of you right from the get-go, right from the start of fetal development. Hormones and their interaction dictates our metabolism, our ability to control heat, our ability to grow, and it starts all on a cellular level. So the tiny, tiny cell is where it starts. So when you have endocrine disorders, they wreak havoc in the body, to be dead honest. And they're harder to control and harder to understand, because in modern medicine we use chemicals and we make synthetic hormones in order to try to mimic what's going on in the body. So it's an intricate science, and one that's harder to control than, say, dealing with a specific organ in the body. We're dealing with a lot of the organs. So our next endocrine organ is our thyroid, which sits in our throat. So if you come down from the tip of your chin and come in, and you feel along your trachea, you'll feel your thyroid cartilage, and then you sort of lose the ability to feel the cartilage, and then you pick it back up at the cricoid cartilage. So basically, when you feel a bit of flesh over the front, you're basically over your thyroid. The next organ is the thymus. It sits really right behind the sternum. Now in all of us, we really don't have a thymus anymore. It's actually shriveled up. It basically functions in the child, and it's there to help our immune system with our T cell maturation. So that's our T cells are part of our white blood cell system. It's the easiest way to put it. So it's part of our immune defense system. It's still there. It doesn't literally disappear, but it just gets quite small and has less of a function. If you think about children, when they're born, they have really, in a sense, weak immune systems because they haven't been exposed to everything outside. That's why sending your kids to school with other kids is really good for your kids, because it helps to challenge and boost their immune system. But it's not so good for you, because then you go through the second wave. When they bring home all this flu, you end up getting sick again because you haven't been introduced to new strains. So like everything in the world, there's evolution, and viruses evolve just like humans evolve. So the thymus has to be big in kids so that it can help the immune system deal with all the new bugs that are coming and meeting it. But then as we age, it gets smaller and has less of a function to when you get to be in an elderly person, it's not functioning, or it's functioning, but maybe on a level that science doesn't really detect, or maybe to the point where science doesn't care anymore. Take your pick, it's a money game. So in that sense, we then come down to Well, we have the parathyroid glands that are behind your thyroid. So the thyroid looks like a butterfly up here in the neck. And when you turn it around, there's four small glands on the back of it that are our parathyroid glands. From the glands, we then come down in both men and women to the mammary glands in the breast tissue. So men do have mammary glands. They just don't have the right amount of estrogen in the body in order to produce milk. So men that go through, who have prostate cancer and go through basically hormone replacement because of prostate cancer end up developing more fatty breast tissue, and some of them actually end up lactating due to the switch in the hormones in the body. So from there, we come down into our adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys. So if you put your hands, wrap your hands around the lower end of your rib cage. Try to find your 12th rib. So if you come from the front and you walk your hands back, coming over your abdominal tissue, come to the back, you've got your 12th rib, which we call our floating rib. And if you follow that rib in towards the spine, you're right between lumbar vertebra 1 and your 12th rib. That's where your kidneys are. If you ever have pain back there, it's probably your kidneys being a bit disgruntled. Your adrenal glands sit right on there, right on top of your kidneys on each side. So you got 2 kidneys. Well, most of us have 2 kidneys, unless you donated one. And you've got 2 adrenal glands. Those adrenal glands are key in our stress reaction and in our fight and flight reaction. They're there to release cortisol. And they're also there to release noradrenaline and adrenaline, or norepinephrine and epinephrine. I get it all mixed up which country uses which word now, so I just say them all. So if you're really stressed out, those adrenal glands work overtime, just sitting on top of your kidneys. There is a fascial sheath between them, but really there's a direct connection in terms of location. So when you're stressed out, by default, your kidneys are going to suffer as well. So it's little things to think about in terms of when you physically have symptoms, or when you have students come in and they have symptoms. So if you want to think about the kidneys, here's a question for you guys. What asanas do you think would stimulate the kidneys? So, so the best one, if you think about forward bend, we're closing the body, we're stretching the back of the body. You're creating space around the kidney, so yet you're letting it breathe. But if you do a backward bend, or you go into chakrasana, the wheel. You guys did the wheel? No. Okay. You did the bow though, right? Dhanurasana, which is the same posture, except rather than having your feet on the floor, you've got your belly on the floor, but it's essentially the same posture. Then you're definitely activating the kidneys. So I know you guys did some warm-ups before I came in the room, so you got a slight advantage over me. We're going to do the bow right now. We're going to go into Dhanurasana. So coming to lay on your mats. Before you actually go into the pose, we're going to warm up the back a little bit because you've been sitting. So we'll do a couple of but we won't bother doing Salavasana completely, but we'll just do some leg lifts. So you can either come into the position for Salavasana, the locust, or you can leave your hands down alongside the body. It's up to you. but placing either the forehead or the chin on the mat, whichever you find to be more comfortable. Lift the left leg up into the air, contracting those back muscles. Does anybody know what back muscles you're using right now? Lumbosacral, exactly. Your lumbar erector spinae, your thoracolumbar fascia. You're actually using your cervical erector spinae. Release the left leg and bring the right leg up. Everybody feel their back. So literally, whether you use your hands or whether you use your mindset, bring your attention to the lumbar spine and then release the right leg. And if you've got it in you this morning, you can either bring both legs up or you can then again alternate again with your left and right leg, doing it at your own pace. Bring your awareness to the 12th rib, to the first lumbar vertebrae, and bring your awareness bilaterally into your kidneys, because that's where they are. And when you're ready, release. Now, if you're up for it, I don't want anybody to strain their backs, but if you're up for it, we'll go into the bow. So bending the knees, bringing the feet towards the buttocks, reaching the arms around to either grab hold of the ankles, or if you just need to grab your trousers, or to just bring yourself into the posture. And then when you're ready, with a nice deep inhalation, lift up and back. Use the weight of your legs to help lift the body up. So as you bring yourself up, bring the legs back. The legs activate the posture. So it's bringing the legs back to bring the body up. So right now, you're causing compression to the area of your kidneys. When you release the posture, when you're ready, you get a giant inflow of blood. Giant influx of blood comes into your kidneys. This is a great detoxing posture. The other posture you can do to detox the kidneys is the camel. So it's essentially, again, these postures really do mimic each other. When I go into the camel, if I went into the camel right now, I'd become extremely nauseous. Because, I'll be dead honest with you, I have a lot of toxins in my body because I drink a lot of coffee right now because I'm preparing for formative exams. So there's a lot of brain activity going on. So I'm eating a lot of sugar and I'm drinking a lot of caffeine to stay awake and a lot of sugar to keep my brain going. So I can 100%, I know that if I went into a back bend right now, I'd come out of it, there'd be a giant rush of blood into my kidneys and around my adrenals, and then I'd want to throw up. So that's that. What happens with this whole process is that the hormones are carried in my blood. So my hypothalamus, up here in my brain, talks to my pituitary gland. Now I have an anterior and a posterior pituitary gland. What happens is the hypothalamus says to the anterior pituitary gland, I'm going to send you a releasing hormone. So it says, I'm going to send you, let's see which one we would want to go with. Oh, they're big long names. It's not really, you'll see it in your PowerPoint, but basically rather than shout out big long names that aren't really going to mean much to you, the hypothalamus is going to say to my adrenaline gland, I want you to go talk to, or to my pituitary, I want you to talk to the adrenal gland. So the hypothalamus releases a hormone that's going to stimulate the release of another hormone from my anterior pituitary gland. That hormone from the pituitary gland goes directly into my bloodstream. And it travels through my bloodstream down to my adrenal glands sitting on top of my kidney. So it's literally like a road map system. These guys know where they're going. Because when it gets down to my adrenal gland, there's receptors on the gland that will accept the hormone. So we've got receptors all over our bodies, in our organs, in our nervous system, in our muscle tissue. We have all these receptors. The thing is, receptors are specific to certain elements. So the receptors on my adrenal glands are specific to certain hormones that get released from my anterior pituitary when the mothership, my hypothalamus, says, hey, I want you to do this. So we get down to my adrenal glands and we get the release of, say, cortisol, which is a stimulating hormone, which gets me going. It's part of my fight and flight system. So when we do yoga, we're helping to rebalance the system. I can tell you most days, my sympathetic nervous system is quite charged. And thank God I have yoga, because that's literally how I balance myself out and I'm able to get to sleep at night. Because my brain is so active right now that it will wake me up. If I don't do yoga before I go to sleep, so I do 20 minutes, I just get on my floor in my room and stretch out and calm my body down. And if I don't do that, at 3:42 in the morning, I'm gonna be wide awake. And it's without fail. I don't know what happens at 3:42 in the closet, but I wake up. And then it takes me a couple of hours to get back to sleep. So there is massive benefits to the practice that you're learning and the practice that you're going to teach.
Can I just ask, what are the particularly calming postures then?
Well, essentially, some of it comes down to really intention, and it can also come down to sequence and then the environment in which you're practicing. You can do a hatha yoga practice that can be quite dynamic and can really get your body flowing, and you get charged and you get really energetic. A lot of standing postures, they're energizing postures, but they're also grounding postures, because you're using your legs, you're using your feet, you're grounding down into the earth to create your balance and to create your foundation. But at the same time, you usually come in, say if you were going to go into a warrior posture, and it's a really dynamic pose because you're grounding down through the legs, but you're then opening up through the chest. So it's energizing. The sun salutation is the most energizing sequence you can do in your life. If you get up in the morning and you're tired, do the sun salutation. And do it without fail. And do 12 rounds. Forget 6. 6 you're just starting to get into your body. And I don't mean like, I've done it one side, there's 1, I've done it the other side, there's 2. That's cheating. Right and left is 1. So do 12 rounds. I know it's going to take you some time. So yeah, it's 24. Look at that, it's 24. Yeah. So everybody get up. We're going to do some sun salutations. How about that? But we're not going to do 12. We'll do 3. You guys do 12. Yeah, the first part of it. That's how you open your feet. Coming to stand in Tadasana. Feel the points of contact under your feet. Now, I know you guys don't do the headstand, but the headstand, it's actually easier to stand on your head than it is to stand on your feet. Because when you're in the headstand, you have more body surface touching the ground than when you have your feet touching the ground. But if we think about grounding through our feet, there's a triangle on the bottom of your feet in terms of your points of contact. So your points of contact on your feet, your heel, i.e. the calcaneum, the bone that's underneath all that fleshy tissue. The base of the big toe, your first toe, and then the base of the little toe, or your fifth toe. Those are your points of contact on the bottom of your feet. So bring your awareness to your feet and try to feel those points of contact. Using your mind, get in touch with your feet. Take a nice deep inhalation, and when you exhale, bring the hands together in front of the chest in prayer position. Thank yourself for coming here today. Inhale, stretch the body up and back. Guess what you're doing? You're activating your kidneys. Exhale, fold the body forward and down. You're now creating a ton of space in the back of the body. You're allowing that blood flow to come in. Inhale and look up. And extend the right leg back. Drop the knee to the ground. And smile. Retain the breath, bring the left leg back. Move to a push-up position. Try to think about the muscles you're using when you go through the postures. So right now we're using our upper limb muscles, but we're also using our toes. And then exhale, drop the body down. And then when you're ready, inhale, come up. Use your back muscles here. Your hands are not involved in Bhujangasana. It's your back. Point the toes away from the body. You might find it a bit easier. And then exhale. Push the body up and back. Coming in to downward dog. Ground into the feet. See if you can get your heels to touch. If you can, walk your feet a little bit closer towards your hands. Try to get the heels to touch the ground. Because what you want to do is you want to shift the weight back. You want to bring the hips up to the sky. You want to allow the chest to open, the shoulder blades to come closer. And then inhale, looking up, bringing the right foot forward, the left knee to the ground. You can all catch your breath. Exhale, bring the legs together. And then inhale, when you're ready, stretch your body up and back. And then exhale down. That's 0.5. We'll go a bit quicker. Yeah. Inhale, exhale, hands in the air. Inhale, stretching the body up and back. Exhale, folding the body forward and down. Inhale, stepping the left foot back, left knee to the ground. Retain the breath. Bring the right foot next to the left into plank. Exhale, bringing the knees, chest, and forehead to the ground. Inhale, pointing the toes, bringing the body up. Make sure you use your back. Exhale, tuck the toes under, push back into downward dog. Inhale, stepping the left foot forward, right knee to the ground. Smile. Exhale, bring the right foot next to the left, coming into the standing forward bend. And then inhale, stretch your body up and back. And then exhale down. That's one. Okay, so I find when I teach the sun salutation to link it with the breath. It's a great way to get people to realize that they're using their lungs as well as using their body. So bringing the breath work into the asana, I personally believe is one of the most important things. Because when we do asana, we're not just affecting the muscles and the bones of the body. We're affecting the body completely as a whole. We're not only affecting the muscles and the bones, we're affecting the blood, we're affecting the nervous system, we're affecting the endocrine system, our hormonal balance in our body. That's why yoga works, because we're opening the body as we do the asanas. We're increasing the blood flow throughout the whole of the body as we open. Fresh blood comes in, stagnated blood and metabolics gets pushed out through our venous and our lymph system. That's the power of yoga. In osteopathy, we call them the principles. And the first principle that Andrew Taylor Still gave to the profession is the rule of the artery is supreme. That man, way back there, in the middle of nowhere, America, during pioneer times, hung out with Native American Indians. I wouldn't doubt it if he had exposure to continental Indians. Either that, or through his religious belief, he just had divine insight. Whichever way it came down, he got the most important principle right. And it's a principle that I think modern medicine abandoned long ago, if it was ever even part of modern allopathic medicine. Now, this is strictly me speaking, and these are my opinions. We take a lot of pharmaceutical drugs in the Western world, and those interact with our hormones, and they interact with our blood. If you don't have good blood supply throughout the body, you lose function. You lose function in the muscles, you lose function in the nervous tissue. And then you lose metabolic function in terms of the endocrine system. Because if your hormones aren't getting to an area, you're going to lose function. So this is why yoga is so powerful. You guys are healthcare practitioners when you teach yoga. You may not think that, but it's something to contemplate, that you are actually healthcare practitioners. And you're primary healthcare practitioners in the sense that people will come to yoga before they've necessarily seen a GP. Because somebody said to them, oh, you should try yoga for your back pain. And they'll come to a yoga class. And maybe they're having back pain because they have arterial sclerosis, so they're getting plaque buildup throughout the arteries of the body, and they're starting to lose blood supply or innervation to muscles. And those muscles are becoming tight. Last night, I gave a massage to a 62-year-old man. Doesn't speak any English. He's one of my good friend's dads. He spent his life as a mason. He basically builds chimneys and walls and works with concrete. He has got 90% occlusion of both femoral arteries into his legs. I don't know how the guy's walking around, to be completely honest with you.
What does that actually mean?
So, from my heart, we've got our aorta, the big, giant vessel coming out of the heart, the artery. Okay? It comes right down my spine in the front, comes right through my diaphragm. When it gets just below my belly button, okay, or right around your umbilicus, it splits off into two arteries. It comes right underneath the inguinal ligament in the pelvis, which comes between the anterior superior iliac spine, so our little knobby bits right here. So everybody, feel your body. Get used to like knowing where things are in your body, because if you know the anatomy, and I didn't believe him for the longest time, if you know the anatomy, you can basically figure stuff out and you empower yourself, right? It's like knowing where the brake and the gas pedal are in the car. If you don't know where those are, you're not going to go anywhere. So the inguinal ligament runs to the pubic bone, so our pubis bone is right in the front. Now, basically the arteries, the abdominal aorta splits, it comes down. When it gets underneath the inguinal ligament, it becomes the femoral artery. The femoral artery supplies the lower limb. All the muscles, interacts with the bones, all your fascia, your nervous tissue, everything is supplied by your femoral artery. If you have 90% occlusion on each side, that means 10% of the blood that gets pumped out of your heart, with each pump, 10% of it is actually going to be able to reach the toes. So, leg pains. So I spent an hour last night just, kneading muscle, just trying to get blood supply into the muscle. The muscles in this man's legs were so tight, it was unbelievable. It's like, no wonder you're having pain when you walk. He said he can walk 200 meters. Is that it? Yeah. I work in feet. I think he said 200 meters before he has the onset of leg pain. He goes up the stairs, but every time he goes upstairs, he has a leg pain. It's because he doesn't have enough blood supply to the muscles. So if the muscles aren't getting the blood, then they get fatigued. So, you then have to start to think about, if your other glands in your endocrine system, in the female it's the ovary, in the male it's the testes. Now, if you're not getting blood supply through the femoral artery, because it then branches off into other arteries that supply the perineum or pelvic bowl, then you're going to start to lose function, both in terms of sexual reproduction, because it's supplying our gonads, which are our sex organs. So, be it a male or a female, if you start to lose supply to the lower limb, you actually start to lose supply to your pelvic cavity. So it then becomes really important, to realize that when we're doing yoga, we're helping to supply the body with blood. We're moving that blood around. So if you're a manual practitioner and you're using soft tissue massage, you're using what we call muscular energy techniques, where we get somebody to resist us, and then when they relax, we stretch their muscles even further. We're as manual therapists with hands-on, we amplify it in the sense that we're aiding somebody, their tissue health and their arterial health. But as yoga instructors, it's just as powerful. We're not literally there doing the hands-on work. We're encouraging somebody to empower themselves, which is actually, in some ways, even better. Because I don't know how many people I'll treat during the week, and I'll give them exercises as part of their plan, and then they come back and I said, how did you go? Did you do the exercises? And it's like, you really got to get through to people. It's the hardest thing in the world to get people to create new habits and to break old habits. We're talking about
your guy therapist.
Yeah, you're talking about
fixing while they're there with you.
So what you end up having to do is say, hey, you know what? Treatment doesn't end when you walk out of my room. Treatment continues when you go home and you do what I told you to do. And that's where, as yoga practitioners, you have to really encourage students to adopt the practice in their daily life. And the best way is give them a small challenge. So when I teach an introductory yoga course over, say, 8 weeks or 12 weeks, the first week, all they have to do is go home and lay on the mat for 5 minutes at some point in their day. That's it. And if 5 minutes is too much, you challenge them, just do it for 3 minutes or 2 minutes. Just lay on the mat. Just lay on the mat. Don't do anything. And really say, don't do anything, just lay there. And they're going to come back and they're going to say, well, they're either not going to do it because they're just not motivated. And those are the most challenging people. But the people that will do it, they're going to come back and they say, yeah, I started off laying on the mat, but then something funny happened. And I started to stretch. So when you fall out of your yoga practices, because you will, when you don't have the stimulation of a course that you're going through, and you fall out of your yoga practice, the best way to get back into your yoga practice is spend a week just laying on your mat for 5 minutes each day. And don't let yourself do anything else than that. Because by day 3, you're going to want to stretch. Don't do it, because that's your punishment. It's a reward-punish system, you know? But it's, in the long run, it's the best intention. It's the tough love from the mother. So it's what I have to do. You know, that's what literally I have to do when I fall out of my practice. Is discipline myself. Just to lay on that mat for 5 minutes each day. And then the second day, forget it. I mean, the second week, it's gone. I'm all over the place. You know, 5 minutes becomes an hour and a half. So you are your own master. You are your own guru. You know, right now, Parvati is your guru because she's awakening you to your own power. But the most incredible guru is the one inside you because you know it all. You really know it all. And it's finding that you need to do. Here is the funny thing. Our pineal gland, which sits behind and just posterior and below, we'll just use easy words, behind and below, the hypothalamus, your pineal gland. Okay, it is a light-sensitive organ. It's called the third eye because in field development, it is an eye. It develops just like an eyeball develops. But rather than staying in the front, it recedes to the back of the brain. It senses light. It gives you what we call the circadian cycle. So when it gets light out, if you don't have your shades drawn and your curtains closed, your pineal gland is going to sense the lightening of the atmosphere as the sun starts to rise, and you'll wake up. And even if you don't become conscious of being fully awake, you will wake up because that gland, that's its function. It is a light-sensitive gland. And its role in terms of the hormone that gets activated, melatonin. So when you time travel, so when you go from London to New York, and you go back in time 5 hours, you have jet lag. Or alternatively, when you travel forward in time from New York to London, you'll experience jet lag. The reason why is that gland in your head doesn't time travel with the rest of you. Okay? So it becomes a little bit unhappy. So it will continue to be on a cycle that it's used to being on. And they're pretty much dead accurate when they say for every hour of time travel, you have to add a day of recovery. And it is really true. So the gland doesn't catch up with you as fast as your perception does. So we can go into a giant metaphysical thing about perception and where you really are in space, but we don't have time for it. But the pineal gland, it's called the pineal gland because it looks like a pine cone. So when you see pictures of the Buddha coming out of Southeast Asia, and he's got all these little bunches on his head. You'll see it on the slides when you look at them at home. But they're basically they look like little pine cones. And the thing is, the pineal gland is considered the psychic center of your being. The caduceus, which is the medical staff that we are familiar with, it has the 2 snakes that wind around the staff. If you look, that comes out of the Vedas, so it comes out of the Indian continent. Traditionally, at the top is not a round ball. Traditionally, it's a pine cone at the top. So it represents the pineal gland. The snakes represent our Kundalini Shakti, our Kundalini energy. Each place that those two snakes intertwine is one of our major chakras. Those major chakras correlate with endocrine glands in the body. So, the seat, root chakra 1 in the perineum, which is between your anus and your vagina, or your anus and your penis. If you look at that area, it is literally an infinity sign. When they dissect that area of the body, the muscle tissue down there looks like the infinity sign. That is your root chakra. Go home and Google it. I didn't put it on the slides, but go home and Google it. It's right there. It creates an infinity sign around the sexual organ and the anus. In the middle of that infinity sign is exactly where your Muladhara chakra is, your root chakra. When you learn how to stimulate it, when they initially teach you, they talk about contracting your perineum. So your perineum is the base of your pelvic cavity. On top of the perineum, we get our coccygeal muscles, so the muscles that go around the anus. We then get everything from our obturator muscles. We get all the deep muscles of the hip, basically, our gemelli, all the muscles that help the ball of the hip to rotate in and out. That everything is sitting down there in terms of muscle tissue. So your perineum is like a sling that helps hold all of that. And when we learn how to stimulate the root chakra, initially they talk about contracting the perineal muscles in order to get the awareness of it. But then, as you advance, they talk about no longer stimulating. It's not about stimulating the muscle tissue. It's about drawing your focus down into the chakra and stimulating it with your mental abilities to get to that root place without having to literally, clench the muscles. When they do Kegel exercises, when women do Kegel exercises in preparation for birth, they're using the muscle tissue and toning the muscle tissue to help with the birth process. But at the same time, indirectly, they're stimulating that root chakra and grounding themselves for the most awesome experience they're going to have in life, which is giving birth to another being. And I know it's like, I haven't gone through it, but I've been there for deliveries, both in hospitals and on the roadside. So I used to be an emergency medical technician. And it's scary as all hell. As a witness, because of the gravity of the situation, but it's also incredibly amazing. So that point in the body, there's your root chakra. We then come up into into the area of the ovaries and the testes. Now remember that everybody is asexual, starts to develop towards being female, and then it's the production of testosterone that then drives the development of the fetus to being male versus female. I know it sounds crazy, but I've got a friend who's reading a book right now on how to have male babies. Because his wife doesn't want to have girls because she's got a lot of anxiety around how women are treated in the world. She works in finance. She works in a male-dominated culture, and she's a quite beautiful, fragile person. And fragile not in the sense of breakable, but like very feminine. But when she goes to work, there's armor that goes on. It looks like a business suit, but it's way more than that. So she wants to have, because I spoke to her about it, and I was like, why are you making Ray read that book on having boys? And she's like, well, he's the one responsible for it. And she's like, I don't want to have girls. And I was like, why wouldn't you want to have a girl? And it really comes down to the culture that she works in has made her jaded. And that she thinks it's easier to be a man in this world. I don't know. But that's just, it's built upon perception, and you're gonna find perceptions with friends, with colleagues, with family members, with students, and the only thing you can do is be accepting, okay? So I completely accept her opinion, because that's her experience in life. So we then move up into the solar plexus. That's our third chakra coming up. Your pancreas is right up in your solar plexus. Your pancreas is one of your endocrine organs. Now I'm not going into all the hormones and all the stuff that flows out of it, because you can read the PowerPoint and you can just dump all the questions you have at me. But your pancreas is one of your endocrine organs as well. The hormones have to do with how everything from the uptake of calcium to, our ability to grow, our ability to sleep. If your pineal gland is not on track, you will have insomnia. Interestingly enough, the pineal gland, which is the seat of our psychic power, is affected by fluoride. Fluoride, which is found in our water and our toothpaste, causes it to calcify. So in most elderly people, when if they do imaging of the brain, they can actually see the pineal gland because it shows up bright white because it's calcified. Now, I have a very good friend who does have mental health issues, but he's absolutely brilliant despite any emotional imbalances in him. And his conspiracy theory, because he loves them, is that the reason why they put fluoride in our toothpaste and in our water is not to make our teeth stronger. It's to calcify the pineal gland, so we're not able to have our own psychic powers and not able to access our own intuitive abilities. You can think, well, that sounds nuts, but you kind of have to wonder about things. Science, nobody just goes away and says one day, we're going to stick this in the water. Because of the rule of ethics, everything gets investigated. So they stick the fluoride in the water and in the toothpaste, and science knows the outcome. And it kind of makes you think, why would you want your pineal gland to calcify? If that's not what normally happens, but happens as a side effect of an additive put in to something we have to live off of. I mean, you don't need Colgate to brush your teeth. Go get some baking soda and or go get even better, go get some neem powder. It tastes horrific, okay? But neem, N-E-E-M, but it's great for your gums and for your teeth. So we have all these alternatives, but society pushes us in one way or another. And it's simple. It's simple to go into Tesco's and buy Colgate and brush your teeth and not think about it. It takes a hell of a lot more effort to find a health food shop in London that actually sells neem toothpaste. So it makes sense why we all are the way we are. I still drink the tap water. I mean, I'm on a budget, man. It's what it goes. So, if my pineal gland's calcifying, it's how it goes. But there's just things to think about and how it then affects you. In terms of, your kidneys help regulate water and salt in the body. And your hypothalamus makes somatostatin, which plays into the regulation of basically blood volume and consistency. So when we talk about blood pressure in the body, blood pressure is regulated by the amount of water that's actually, in the body and in the kidneys. And are we excreting excess water, or are we retaining water in the kidneys' function? So the kidneys have ureters attached to them. The ureters empty into the bladder, and then the bladder empties out of the body. the function of the kidneys is to control the salt and water balance in our body. And that salt and water balance affects the bloodstream, and it affects basically the concentration of our blood. Is it more or less diluted? That affects our heart, how hard our heart has to pump. So you can't really separate any of it out. It always comes back, okay? I read an article this week in the United States for preventative medicine. They want to start giving everybody over a certain age statin drugs, regardless of if you need them or not. That is insane. Okay? Of course it does. Of course it makes sense for the pharmaceutical companies. Of course it makes sense for the shareholders that sit in seats in government. Of course it makes sense. It's a war on people. You know, and if I sound preachy, I am. But this is, you know, why do you go to war with another country? It makes a hell of a lot of money if you're in the right industry and you have the right shares in the right industry. It's the same thing. Why would you suddenly prescribe 300 million people? Okay, half that. Why would you prescribe 150 million people statins? Because they're over a certain age.
50 is the age they're looking at, isn't it? The looking at it.
Statins are a synthetic hormone. So the hypothalamus produces somatostatin, which helps regulate the content of water, basically within the blood. So the osmolarity of your blood, whether it's thick or thin, whether your heart's pumping more or pumping less. So it's a drug, synthetic hormone. What's wrong with the hormone that we have in our body already? You know, it's not a problem of the endocrine system. It's a problem of our diet. So rather than coming out and saying to people, change your diet, and rather than saying to the Food and Drug Administration, you gotta stop letting them put all this crap into the food, and you gotta actually start selling food in the supermarket and not boxes of additives. You know, actually real food. You know, if you change the basic level, if people change their diet, they can regulate the amount of hormone in the body. They can regulate how their kidneys are uptaking or getting or excreting water and the salt balance in the body. So, but, you know, what makes more money? Creating a drug and giving it to everybody makes more money. There are some really bad side effects of statin drugs. It includes muscle aches, dry sockets, bone pains.
Even mood changes.
Because it's your brain. It's
My mom's just gone off it because she just said she became such a horrible person.
Yeah, it's affecting your brain. If the initiating chemical, so the hypothalamus again makes hormones that are releasing hormones. They go down to the pituitary gland, whether it's the posterior or the anterior part, and they say, release this into the bloodstream. So we're talking about a messaging system in the body that works over days to months. So your nervous system has huge effects throughout the whole of your body, you know? Your brain itself is the mothership of your nervous system. Everywhere in you is nervous tissue. It's fast, quick, lightning quick, you know, faster than anything I can say out of my mouth. My nervous system sends a signal and something happens. My endocrine system sends stuff through my blood. It finds the right receptor, and then it triggers. So it finds a receptor on the outside. Then what happens is inside the cell, it releases a chemical reaction within the cell, and then another hormone is released from that organ that then creates a change on a wider level in my body. It takes hours to days or weeks. If you think about the menstrual cycle, it's 27 days of shifts and estrogen and progesterone in order for the menstrual cycle to happen. If you start giving drugs that affect your endocrine system, they're going to affect the brain, and they're going to affect the whole rest of the body, and they're going to do it over days and weeks. So it makes the picture a lot more grave when you start having side effects from these drugs, because they're side effects that are occurring over days and weeks. In diagnostic medicine, as the other health practitioners in the room know, we determine things as to whether it's acute or chronic based upon how many days or weeks or months the symptoms are affecting the patient. It's the same thing with your endocrine system. It works over, hours to days to weeks. Or in terms of a cycle, a month-long cycle in the female. So you start taking synthetic drugs. Now, it's not all bad, Some of the drugs they give you, you really do need. If you have a problem with your endocrine system, if you have a problem with kidney function, they're going to give you synthetic hormones to help you regulate, and it will save your life. But in terms of taking statins as a preventative measure when you don't need it, it's actually quite dangerous. Red yeast, which is a natural, organic product of the earth, does the same thing that statins do. It lowers your cholesterol. Red yeast,
And oats.
Are you familiar with like brewer's yeast?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's along the same lines as brewer's yeast, but it's called red yeast, but it's within essentially the same family. And you can add it to your food. And then it helps to lower your cholesterol. Now that's what my dad takes, and his GP, I don't know how he found out about it because he's an old boy of medicine, but he prescribed red yeast to my dad after having given my dad statins. And then my dad started having bone pains. His bones started to hurt. He started to have muscle aches and muscle spasms in his legs. My dad's a hiker. He walks an insane amount of mileage every week. So that started to, he physically couldn't do his normal activities. So then you have somebody who's incredibly active suddenly becoming sedentary. And then you start to feel depressed because you physically don't feel well enough to do what you normally do. How is that preventative? Because his diet's not changing really. He's now becoming more sedentary. Your fats are going to build up in the body. I mean, that's what cortisol does. It helps you take up fat in the body. Because if you think about, I'm running from the bear to save my life, you need as much energy as possible for your body to burn so you can run for your life. So in a normal system, cortisol, along with the other things it does, it helps your body retain lipids, which is fat. So when you have the high stressed out period in your life, you're retaining lipids or fats in the body, and that also is your cholesterol. Lipids are cholesterol, high density, low density lipids. Yep.
Is it bad if you've got high cholesterol, which is the good one? You've got high cholesterol, but the good one is...
It's just a balance. So if you've got your, now my brain's not working. I think it's your low density lipids that are the good ones, and your high density lipids are the okay, so we talk about good and bad. Yeah, I mean, really they're not bad, but yeah, the balance is what makes them bad. So if the low is high and the high is low, it's not a problem. If the high, aka the bad ones, are really high, and the low ones are really low, then that starts to produce a problem, because actually what it means is you're retaining lipids, you're retaining fat in the body, and one of the places that fat likes to lay down is along your arteries. And it's not just in the heart. We always talk about the heart in terms of cholesterol, but it's the health. So in the case of my friend's dad yesterday, who I gave a treatment to, you know, his femoral arteries, so the main supply of his blood to his lower limb, those arteries, which, I don't know, what do you guys think? Think they're about as wide as the thumb? Probably about as wide as your thumb, that artery down there. You know, think about like, well, suddenly that circumference gets tinier and tinier and tinier because the walls of the artery are suddenly getting deposits of fat within them. So they're literally going from this to this to this to this. So less blood is actually able to pump through. So you're producing just as much blood in your body, but there's less places for it to go. What happens? Blood pressure goes up. And then you start having systemic effects up here.
Can you get thrombosis? Is that where that, if the arteries are narrowing, that's where you might get assault?
So, yeah, I mean, you can get, so, you know, say you fall or you bang into something and you have tissue damage. Whenever you have tissue damage, you have what's called an inflammation cascade. So all these chemicals come over to the area to figure out what's going on, and then they start recruiting other other cells. So it's first like chemical mediators get thrown out there that alert the body to like, whoa, something just happened down there, we need your help. We get different cells that come in. So macrophage cells come in, and they start to take away the debris. So broken tissue cells, broken blood cells, they start moving the debris away. And then other cells come in to start the repair process for the tissue. If you have an occlusion in your arteries and you end up with a clot of blood that breaks off and gets into the bloodstream, and it can't fit through that occluded artery, it's like sticking a cork in a bottle. Take a bottle of champagne, shake the hell out of it, watch the pressure build. You know, when you take that cork out, it's yeah, well, that's sort of like what happens in the body. When you get an occlusion, you get a back pressure. You know, when your abdominal aorta has a thrombosis, it's usually right in that area before it bifurcates, so before it splits off into two vessels. Normally, when they talk about an aneurysm, it happens above that area, so just around above the belly button is where it happens. So what happens is you get all this blood coming down, and then it's like a hose, you know, you've got water comes out of the tap, there's big pipes that go into the tap, it comes out of the tap, it goes into the hose, and then if you narrow the hose, unless, you know, kink the hose with, you know, and then suddenly you'll watch back pressure and the hose will start to get bigger behind the kink because less water can get through. It's coming just as fast, but there's less area for it to move to. So you get higher pressure down there, and you get a backage here, and the hose starts to go like that. That's what happens in your body. Your arteries are tubes. And then if you start to get arteriosclerosis, and it starts to narrow, the vessel above that narrowing starts to get weaker. And over time, it can then actually get bigger. You know, and then, God, if it breaks, lights out. But in terms of other parts of the body, you know, you get a blood clot, and we have what's called deep vein thrombosis in the legs, or DVT. And so it can happen within the hip, like in the thigh, and basically it's the back of the calf. So within the popliteal artery, so your femoral artery comes down. Then we have what's called the abductor hiatus, right? So everybody do this. These are your abductor muscles. So if you bring your leg out, you're stretching them, and then keep your hands on your legs, and then bring your leg in. And you feel the muscles start to contract. Okay, those are your abductors. Right around here, there's a hole in it. They call it the abductor hiatus. Your femoral artery goes through the abductor hiatus. Sorry, adductor, sorry, yeah. Goes through the adductors, comes out behind the knee. It becomes your popliteal artery, supplying the knee. And you can feel it back there. It's not easy to feel, but if you go medial, so we're on the medial aspect of the knee back here. I'm pretty rubbish at feeling these ones, to be honest, on myself and other people. But back there is where you'll feel your popliteal artery. That artery then supplies the whole of the calf, as well as the front of the leg. If that artery gets occluded back there, your calf becomes swollen, becomes red, so the flesh, your skin flushes, becomes hot, it becomes painful to all hell. That's why when you're sitting on a time travel flight, they give you those annoying exercises to do this to your ankles, to move your ankles around. They're doing that because they're trying to help, if you're in America, you know, the majority of the population that have arterial sclerosis because of diet. They're trying to keep those people from coating in the air, from having a deep vein thrombosis. I know it sounds sadistic, but it's God honest truth, you know? I have friends that are firefighters at airports throughout the United States, and they tell me some of the greatest stories in the world. And I have other friends who have been on long haul flights and had people go down, and they've ended up after, like, you know, one of my friends, he ordered the plane to land. He's like, okay, this person is not going to make it, and we need to land. And everybody on that flight wanted to beat him up. Because they landed, and then they had to evacuate the person from the plane. And that took hours, you know. But yeah, in the end, it saved the guy's life, because he did. He had a deep vein thrombosis. He was overweight, he was drinking alcohol, you know, you're flying from Boston to Denver, and you're dehydrating yourself, because that's what alcohol does. So don't drink alcohol when you fly, you know. If you really want to have the pop, have it in the airport bar. But once you get on the plane, just start drinking water. Avoid Coca-Cola and avoid caffeine. Avoid anything that's going to dehydrate you. Because when you're at 36,000 feet in the air and you're under a cabin pressure with fake air that just keeps getting recycled through the whole of the plane, so by the time you get 5 or 6 hours across somewhere, how much oxygen is left in that air? Really? You know?
This is great for us who are going off next month. I'm doing 24 hours.
So here's the key. Sit towards the front of the plane. Always try to get your seat close to the front of the plane because you get better oxygen. But it's all right. I'm gonna fly across the Atlantic for Christmas. You know, it's gonna be a long flight. You can't stop living, but you can start making choices. And it comes down to educating each other is where our choices become important. Okay? So as yoga teachers, become judgmental in the sense that you scrutinize information. You know? Become critical of me. Become critical of anything and everything I've taught you. That's good. That's my intention, is to stimulate you to want to learn more for your own self, but also for the sake of the people that come in front of you. Because in this room, how many are we? Anybody know? Okay. 25? 25. How many, say you have a yoga class and you have 20 people in your yoga class? Or even 10 people in your yoga class? 25 times 10? That's 250 people. So right now I'm talking to 250 people. Okay? And then maybe some of you will end up in the position I'm in today, and you'll have 25 or 30 people in front of you, and then those 25 or 30 people are going to go off and teach at least 10 people. You see how it works? Swami Vishnudevananda, who is one of my gurus, started the New World Order back in the 1960s while he was sitting on a beach in the Bahamas. He had a vision of something catastrophic happening and people running. So if you've ever been to Nassau, Bahamas, Paradise Island is right outside of Nassau. It's a beautiful place, and when you sit there and you're looking out at the Atlantic Ocean, you couldn't imagine thinking anything negative. But this man sat there in meditation and had a disturbing vision. When he came out of it, he started what he calls the New World Order, and that was disseminating yoga, teaching students yoga in order to then them go and teach other people. And his real insight was to try to, through yoga, produce new world leaders. So that's what you're doing. By arming yourself with information about the human body, and not just literally your physical body, but all your koshas, all your bodies, and then helping other people learn, you're empowering them. So yeah, you're creating physical effects right then and there on the yoga mat, but then you're creating sustaining effects by helping people make choices, by just giving them information. And if you mess up and you give them the wrong information, what's really important is that you're gonna get things wrong. I get things wrong. I stand in front of you and I get things wrong, words wrong, I say things backwards, and you guys help me and correct me, and it's awesome. And the thing is that when you guys correct me, A, it tells me you're not sleeping, and B, it tells me you're thinking and you're learning. And that's really what's important, is that you're thinking and learning at the same time. You're taking the information in and you're going, oh, that's not right. And then you're feeding it back. So that's what's really important throughout the whole of this. So I stood up here for I don't know how many weeks now, a couple. And each week I've given you nine. It's been 9. Each week I've given you a ton of information about an area of the body. And it's like, oh my God, here she goes again. Do we have to learn this? And it's not about really whatever you take away from it is what you take away from it. But hopefully it's helped you guys to understand your own body better, but to be more critical of everything that comes in from the outside. Because although we would like to think that everybody in the world has the best intention for everybody else, that's not how it really works.
Really? Could we say discerning?
Discerning.
Discriminative discernment rather than critical.
Yeah.
Critical
Okay.
is a little bit judgmental.
But if it's okay.
Just
But
discerning.
it's constructive. I think is the word to go in front of it.
That's good.
Constructive criticism.
Yeah.
We have all kinds of hand signs for unconstructive criticism, and those are just as powerful. So we think about mudras, right? There's a mudra. I can't even do it right now. Vishnu mudra. This is the sign of a painter. You can't actually flex your fingers after a long time. But then we have the other mudras, the inverted peace sign. So not this one, but the other one. And then we have, the middle finger, which is another peace sign, in retaliation to unconstructive criticism. It's really funny. Okay. So whenever I give somebody the finger in this country, they're always surprised, I know you're thinking, oh my God, why did I hire this woman to teach? But it's true, and it's just funny. Sometimes people just, I really find it crossing in central London at a traffic light. And people are just, they're not there. They're in the car and they're going and they don't care if you're there, And yeah, it gets the better of me sometimes. And I let the bird fly and there's verbal response. And you just see people woo. They weren't expecting that coming. Self-expression is important. Self-expression in a yoga class is important. And when people express, and if people express unconstructive criticism or anger, it's okay. It's okay. It's really then comes down to how you perceive it, and how you deal with it. And disarming, is important. Try not to get involved in the drama, but just step back. And I'm not always good at it in my own personal life. And I'm sure all of us have those experiences in life. But in the end, it's okay. People are going to cry. People are going to get angry. People are going to get really happy. Sometimes in yoga classes, all people do is laugh. And that's a really excellent experience. There's such a thing as laughing yoga. I have a really good friend who lives down in Mexico, and all I have to do is hear him laugh, and I'm gone. I'm just laughing. And so, it's that kind of thing. We all bring dynamic energy into the world, and sometimes energy is great, but the art of yoga is not just limited to teaching asana. The art of yoga is to be able to find that neutral space with somebody where your energy's great, but if the other person doesn't realize it and you realize it, it's like be the ball. Don't live in a box, live in a ball. We live on a planet that is described to us as circular. And it's what the astronauts see when they're out of space. Our planet looks like a ball. And then we all live in square boxes. So it starts to make you think, we create territory in boxes. We don't create territory in balls. Native Americans lived in teepees. A teepee, if you've ever been in one, isn't square. The plains of the United States have nothing but flat land and tons of wind. If you put a box up, it is going to just tumble. If you put a round building up, the air is going to move around it. It's not going to flip over. It's going to stay down because the air can move around it. There's no edges. There's no edges to get caught on and create dynamic force. So it's really, your cells in your body, they're all circular unless something goes wrong. And then they may change shape, like sickle cell anemia, where your red blood cells start looking like a sickle, like a half moon, rather than being like a ball. Okay, so I think the most important message that I can give you throughout all this stuff of all these systems that I've come in here and taught is acceptance. Really, accepting yourself and accepting others, and then pushing yourselves in a really good way, in a challenging way, to find answers to the questions that you have and that your students are going to bring to you. Because you're in a very powerful place. You're healthcare practitioners, and you're here to help people become empowered to their own innate abilities. And that's physical abilities, mental abilities, emotional abilities, and psychic abilities. So I don't care how much fluoride I get in my toothpaste, and I don't care how much fluoride I get in my water, because I know what's happening. And that's empowering. So even if my pineal gland calcifies, I'm not going to lose my perception and my abilities, because I'm going to use my other koshas. Okay? I'm going to use what's out here in my perception and not just what's in here. So be discriminative, okay, with yourself and with every part of the culture. But try not to get hung up on the stuff that drags you down. Acknowledge it, learn from it, and then make a positive choice and a conscious choice, and help your students to be empowered in the same way. Because that's really the power of yoga. It is about mind control, okay? And if you can control the fluctuations in the mind, you're controlling the fluctuations in the emotions, you're controlling the fluctuations in the endocrine system, you're controlling your hormonal release. And then that is then affecting all the organs in the body. All right, so that's how you make change. So meditate. I know, I don't do enough of it myself. It's easy to stand here and say all this stuff. It's harder to live it. So, you know, I'm not an exception. I'm not an example. I am just like you guys. And even though I've got a bit more experience on this path of yoga right now, it doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't. Because in many ways, I'm either at the same place as you, or I'm behind you, okay? So, be your own guru. Look to other enlightened people, whether they're in orange, in a turban, or look just like you. Because there's enlightened people all around you, and there's an enlightened person inside you. Okay? Can you dig it? All right. That's the end. For once, I'm going to end on time. Any questions?
I like the input.
Are you here next month?
Yeah, I'm going to come next one because I thought it was teaching. So I'm going to come anyways. If there's time permitting and you actually want a full yoga class, if Bob is up for it, I'm happy to come and do the integral sequence full on, take you through the whole thing. That's what I said. If time permits and they want a full yoga class, a yoga class next month, I'm happy to come and do it.
Would you like that?
Yes.
Next Sunday before graduation?
Yeah.
Sorry?
And the tree up and move
No.
What? No. What? You gave me just the regular one, right?
Yeah, regular one.
Yeah. So we'll do. Let's see.
Okay, we'll do that.
We'll start with. We'll do.
I'll run through it with you, Mona.
I don't know your opening chant.
I'll run through it.
Okay, cool. But yeah, we'll start with the, in terms of asana, we'll do the sun salutation. I won't make you do 24 rounds. Just actually only 12. We'll do a few rounds of those, and then we'll go through the rest of it. Cobra, locust, bow, forward bends, all that good stuff. Yeah?
All that good stuff.
All that
Okay.
good stuff.
Which teaching did you do? What yoga did you train in?
I started, God, I can't remember. I'm bad with years, but I started a while ago, and I did a yoga training with a woman who lived in the area that I lived in. What did they call it? I can't even remember what they called it now, oddly enough. But basically, it was sort of a general yoga course. She had a guru who was an Indian man who had emigrated to Canada, and that's where she met him. And then he emigrated to the United States, and a bunch of his students, including my yoga teacher, emigrated to the United States to live around him.
Wow.
Yeah, so this guy had experience of transcendental enlightenment. And so she learned yoga from him, and her husband did as well, and they started a teacher training course. And then I started going to her classes when I got out of university, because I was living in the area. And then she said to me one day, "Would you like to do my teacher training course?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds cool." And really, I was motivated by contracting Lyme's disease. Motivated me to become a yoga instructor, not because I wanted to teach anyone. I just thought it was more economic in order to be my own yoga instructor, so that I wouldn't have to pay anybody to teach me, and I wouldn't have to be dependent upon living in an area where somebody was teaching yoga. So I mean, truly, it's a selfish attitude, but that's how I got into yoga. So, got sick, decided, well, if I'm gonna live with something that can be dormant in my nervous system and attack me at any time in my life, modern medicine isn't the answer. It's more a lifestyle change that is the answer. So I took her training, and when I came out of it, I felt like I didn't quite have the confidence to teach, and I didn't quite know what to teach, because in her training we got exposed to all different styles. We had teachers from like everything, Ashtanga teachers, Sword teachers, like all different types of teachers came in and taught us different asana sequence. And I ended up, I was in California visiting friends and decided that I needed to chill out for a bit. And I went to Grass Valley, California, to the Shivananda Yoga Farm for a Christmas retreat. And while I was there, it was like, wow, this place is cool. And it was the first time I'd ever sat in front of an altar and had people chanting Vedic chants. And I can remember at one point thinking, oh my God, if my parents saw me now, they'd take me out of here immediately. And but really what caught me in that lineage was the chanting. So when I chant, I get high, and my body physically shakes because the Kundalini energy just starts going woo. And that's really what like drew me to that organization, was actually the chanting. But then when I did their training to teach their style, I found that it was really empowering, because it gave me a grounding. It gave me a sequence to teach from. And it's really funny when I meet people who say to me, do you teach the same thing every time? And I say, yeah. Yeah, we start off with, pranayama, and then we do the headstand, and then we do the shoulder stand. And yeah, it's the same sequence every time. And I don't want to take a yoga class. And I go, okay. Because some people feel they need different things. But the real beauty of having a sequence to teach from, which is what you guys have, is that you can modify that sequence. You can make it really gentle and therapeutic. You can build on it. So you can start with the basic elements of a posture, and you can teach somebody who's never done yoga, and you take them through stages. And in Shivananda, that's what we do. We start off with the skeleton of the sequence when we teach beginner yoga. And by the end of 8 or 12 weeks, they'll finally get close to a full Shivananda yoga class. And then you can make it really difficult in terms of challenging. There's 108 asanas. You ever seen that poster?
Yeah.
Okay. Really, there's probably 1,008 asanas because you can modify every asana. And that was really empowering, to be able to teach people who are bound to chairs, so who can't get on the floor, people who live in wheelchairs, people who, have cerebral palsy and walk with sticks, and who are destined to someday be in a wheelchair. You can teach these people yoga, and you can see them do amazing things with their body, because everything is there. We all have the same stuff, give or take a few muscles here and there. But in terms of our wiring, we're all wired the same. And then when things go wrong, it just means something isn't signaling correctly. And so you do have the opportunity with yoga, using it therapeutically, to help people gain abilities that are dormant in them. So somebody who has cerebral palsy has every single ability you have, just the wiring's gone wrong. And it's dormant. Some of their abilities are dormant. That's really the best way to think about it. So rather than thinking people lack abilities or just don't have abilities, try to change the mindset and be open. And your openness will then help their openness. And then sets a foundation, it sets a groundwork where maybe things can unfold. So, but yeah, so I ended up doing Shivananda training in Canada. Then I did their advanced training in Nayar Dam in India. And then I've done a lot of different styles, just investigated a lot of different styles. I found Ashtanga yoga was really great in terms of increasing my physical strength, but I was losing flexibility. So I tend not to do Ashtanga yoga. I need flexibility. I don't need so much strength, because that's what's important for my body, is to be flexible. So, namaste. Namaste. Yeah, that's good.
So you've got a tea break.